Eric, the first time that I could recollect hearing your name was through the banger of a book, The Almanack of Naval. For myself, around like 4 to 5 years ago, I could generally tell you that it was one of those that I always revisited. This and Toys of Titans by Tim Ferriss were like in my top two.
Nice.
I'm more so curious to understand your origin story a little bit more. I was reading that you graduated, or maybe you didn't graduate from Michigan State, which you could explain a bit. You worked at this internship at this place called Zarly's, and you also had this blog called Evergreen. So I'm curious as
Mhm.
to like why did you start that blog, and how did you get to that point where Naval is giving you the green light to say let him cook and you write the almanac.
Uh, I'll start at the beginning, but go quick. I grew up in just outside Detroit in like a very small business family. Like my grandfather started a business after he got out of the Navy. My dad spent most of his life running that business, and so I kind of grew up thinking it was normal to run a business, which is awesome. So I was like selling candy out of my locker and getting in trouble for cutting into bake sale profits and stuff like that. Uh, in college, I don't know. It was pretty clear to me that like the classes weren't doing me that much good. I did a business and econ major, so I liked learned a lot. But I was trying to start companies. I was working with startups. I was trying to start a business incubator at Michigan State. And so when I got an opportunity to join uh, this startup, Zarly, I just never went back for my last year of school. And I did end up sort of like finagling a way to still graduate technically, but I never actually went back for the last year. I just like got the equivalent of the credits and had moved out to San Francisco by that time. I worked at this company, and I loved like being in San Francisco in that era. But I also felt like I had a lot left to learn, and so that was where the blog started. It was just like trying to find a structured way to learn and build a reputation, and write, and I just love doing it. So the original structure of Evergreen was I'd send out an email, and it started with just like 10 or 15 friends. I sent an email, be like, hey, I'm trying to learn about network effects or competitive advantage or whatever it was. Send me the best thing you ever read about it, whether it was a book or a podcast or whatever. And I read and listened to everything over the course of a week. And then I'd write like a summary of what I learned and link back to all the original things. And that just like snowballed up to, 10,000 plus subscribers. And it was a really cool thing to happen over the course of like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. But I learned a lot and like met a lot of really interesting people that way. It was a great kind of experience.
And what did your family think about it? Because you just mentioned that, you have that Navy background. When you were writing
Mm.
on the internet, were they like, what are you trying to do with this? Or was it more so you were saying this is just like my hobby to learn more on the side while I try to build a business? Because at least for myself, I guess as a millennial, past 4 years, 5 years, I've been writing an email letter and doing podcasting. And sometimes it's hard to explain what I'm trying to do exactly because my parents' generation or grandparents' generation didn't really grow up on the internet. So I don't know if they looked at you like you had a tinfoil hat or something like that.
No, I mean I still had a day job, so I think that helped. I didn't go like YOLO full creator mode. It would have that actually would have been a great idea in retrospect. Like that would have worked perfectly fine. Uh, but I generally pretty supportive. It wasn't that weird, and I think it was cool. It's a cool way to like stay in touch and show my work, like show what I was learning, show what I was up to, and it gave me like proof of work and proof of interest, which I think is a lot of like, I refer to it now as like building your own credentials. College degrees and don't necessarily mean what they used to. Like there's a lot of people now that have worked at Google or Tesla or whatever. And so if you want to stand out, if you want to build a reputation, a lot of it comes down to like, what have you created? How much have you breadcrumbed like your interests and your growth, and how much trust have you created? And it doesn't have to be a big number or big audience to
Mhm.
be, this demonstrable track record of your growth.
Yeah, I could resonate with that piece that you just mentioned with writing on the internet. Somehow spontaneously, I've been able to speak to individuals that I used to read their books, like yourself. And it's all through just like the repetition, which I think is super dope because for myself, I did this thing to hopefully do something like this, but I never really thought it was a reality. So that's pretty interesting for myself to hear your story as well. So, like, at what piece or at what time in your timeline you're cooking up Evergreen, have a good amount of open rates, subscribers that you're like, wait, actually, I could do something more with this and maybe not have to, continue in my full time job and start writing?
Well, the mistake that I made, I think, was seeing this doesn't seem like a mistake, but I think it was in retrospect. I saw it as more than a newsletter. I underestimated what a newsletter could be, and I made what I thought was the necessary leap from newsletter to like trying to build a tool, a platform. So like what I wanted to do was essentially create like a hacker news style thing that wasn't a news feed, that wasn't about what was new today, but was about quality and enduring quality. And so I tried to kind of build a website, a platform that would surface these really timeless, really high quality things. And I just didn't, if I had seen more clearly, the value of just like continuing to do that same exact newsletter for 10 years, I think I'd probably have a 1 million subscriber newsletter like Lenny and Packy and, James Clear or Farnham Street. Like we were, that was sort of the cohort of Stratechery was still early in those things. I don't even think the hustle had been started yet. And I really underestimated the newsletter as a tool, as a business. And if I just kept doing that and compounding it, I could have kind of figured my way to it. I still have an email newsletter, but it's, 50,000 subscribers because I kind of meandered and went to go do these books. And was just inconsistent with it, which I don't regret the books by any means. Like, but I think it's easy to underestimate really simple things done continuously.
And when you say same style, do you mean just like having a very defined niche in a sense?
A niche, a consistency. I think the shtick was a good one. The frame, which is like, hey, I'm gonna learn. It's still it's what I do today. I learn and distill. Like I consume millions and millions of words of like someone's public information, and then I write a book. It's just the longer form version of I'm going to consume everything I can about this topic, and then I'm going to write an email, or a blog post. But I just sort of scaled it up, and the books are great, and I love my career as an author, and it's a little more relaxing to me to work on like a long scale project than to like hit a deadline every week, even if you're, you got to send on Sunday at midnight, even if you're not quite happy with it, or even if you don't feel done with that topic. But when you reject that, that's when you end up like, wait, but why? And you write, you write one gigantic blog post that turns into a book every 3 years, because you can always find something new or important to kind of add to this thing.
Right. Yeah, I just saw your email pop up on my Gmail about another book with Dave Senra. So I was like, all right, this guy's cooking up another one.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. Eric, so in that point, right, like you're transitioning from writing these email letters to then that first book with Naval. Like I saw that you heard a podcast about him and you compiled this information, and was, correct me if I'm wrong, how did he find your work? He retweeted it and then he told you to write a book. Like how exactly did that come into fruition there?
Okay, so I've been following Naval for a really long time, like 10 years. When I was like 19, I met my first like really legit, worldly San Francisco startup guy with multiple exits, and he was like, "Go read everything by Paul Graham and go read everything on the AngelList blog, and like you'll understand the Valley." And I was like, "Okay, deal." So I printed them both out and I read everything, and I liked them both, and followed Naval closely for the next 10 years as he built AngelList and continued to write and post and podcasts and things. And I also read all of Buffett and Munger and those guys. And like what's interesting is that they never write their own books, and so it's just compilations that other people have built out of their stuff from letters and meetings. And so I love that format, and I was like, I want more people to have done this, for like, and I wish Naval would write a book. And so I just kind of tweeted this like random idea of like, if I compiled Naval's like most important ideas, would you guys want that? And just like, didn't think much of it, like tweeted it and went to bed. And I woke up and found that Naval had retweeted it, and 5,000 people were like, "Oh my God, yes, please do this." But also a few thousand people were like, "This is a terrible idea, shut up." But I listened to the ones that were excited about it. And just started working. He said, like, I'm happy to provide you everything I need. And I should say, I don't think, it's because I did anything special or had any like particular reputation. We had mutual, sort of connections in common. I don't know if he did any background research at all. I don't even know if he looked at my site, but he has a very open policy with like, yeah, sure, use my stuff. It's open source. Just give me credit and, make it clear what the nature of the relationship is, which I did. And we had set some kind of a frame for the book and came to an agreement, and I started working on it. But I don't think, I was well positioned for that internally because I had like done a bunch of curation work, but I don't think I had anything like super, super special. I think he would have said yes and has said yes to many people who just either didn't follow through or didn't follow through with like the level of obsession and, and
Yeah,
investment that I did.
right. And so Naval gives you his blessing, but like, how do you actually determine to work on this thing? Like, do you kind of expect like maybe this could be my next jump in my career? Because for myself, it's like, how do you know this is worth years of your time if there's no like upfront, I guess, benefit in terms of money? Like, are you still working a full-time job while writing the almanac? Like, what was your thought process to that?
Yeah, I was still working a full time job. I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea what it would be,
Mm-hmm.
what impact it would have. I just knew I liked doing it, and I knew my sense was that even if the only person who ever knew about it was Naval, if I did a good enough job, that would be meaningful. And I even up to the day I published it, even after, I thought I would sell a few thousand copies. Like I thought maybe 10,000 copies, which, to be clear, like I invested a lot of hours, like a lot over years, nights and weekends. And at the point that I published the book, I worked with Scribe, where I was CEO for a while now. But back then I was just a customer, and that was the biggest check I'd ever written in my life to publish that book. It was more than my car. I didn't have a house. I was like living in an apartment, and the reason I could save that money up was because my apartment flooded, and so they like moved me to this temporary apartment, and I got free rent for a couple months, and that was how I like saved up that check to publish that book. But it was, I knew I needed it to represent the best of me, and I knew that I wanted to be like very proud of it and give it the best chance of success that I could. And people had offered to pay for it, and I was like, no, I want to, like, this is on me. I want to be accountable for it. I want to be all in. And I truly did not think I'd get that money back. And it is the best investment I've ever made in my life, was to like make that a high quality thing, because now it's how people know me. It established my reputation. It led to all these other opportunities and investments and relationships that have been incredible over the last like 5-6 years.
Damn. Yeah, that story about your apartment flooding. What happened there? Like, that's pretty nuts.
Oh, it just built a shitty building and let a bunch of water in, and so everybody had to like move out. It was wild.
So at that time, like, you're pretty much making this asymmetric bet that this could pretty much propel you to the next chapter in your life. Reading into your story more, Eric, it was pretty dope to see that you're also CEO of Scribe, which, from my understanding, this book right here, Can't Hurt Me, guy named David
Hmm.
Goggins, worked with you guys. Did you work with him directly, or how was that?
No, that was before my time. So I wrote my first book with Scribe in 2019, published it in 2020, and then I published my second in 2023. So that company was started by Tucker Max and Zach Obron, legends, awesome guys. As they grew the company, they hired the CEO, and brought him in, and kind of the three of them really grew that company. When they stepped back, these guys are founders. They were ready to just go different directions in life. And Tucker went and just kind of became like a farmer, and it helps people write memoirs. And Zach joined the core team at Ethereum. So like both legends, but like hard left and hard right. Um, and they just sort of stepped back. And when the CEO took over, he started kind of making mistakes, and then making bigger mistakes to cover them up. And then um, it seems that kind of slippery slope led to like some outright fraud, and then covering the stuff up until the very last minute, when it just imploded and ruined a lot of people's lives and burned a lot of people. And I was one of the people who got caught up in that. So I lost 5 figures personally, in that bankruptcy, as an author who'd prepaid for services. And I loved Scribe. Like that, the first book changed my life, and so I wanted to help everybody that I could, and so I kind of jumped in and started volunteering and trying to help them get that company back on its feet. And that I somewhat overachieved on a volunteer position and ended up as CEO for a couple of years, and just stepped back from that this spring after the
Mm-hmm.
company we got the team rebuilt and the reputation rebuilt, and kind of on the rails now.
Yeah. And so after that process with building the almanac goes out, goes viral, what's your thought process now after that book hit? Are you just thinking, okay, I could just get fixated on, being an author and keep doing the similar style of doing this jigsaw style type of making new books with different people, or what was your like mentality at that point?
Yeah, I mean, seeing the response to it, definitely like I had fun doing it, and seeing the response to it inspired me to do more and getting a lot of like really kind DMs about the impact that it's had on people and seeing people all over the world read it. Um, it's very it's easy to be excited about doing it again. And even though it's hard and it's a little bit addicting too, in the same way that like once you've kind of navigated this maze that seemed impossible, you're like, oh my god, I could run. I don't know if you play Call of Duty, but it's like prestige mode, right?
Of
Like, oh,
course, yeah.
I can play through this whole game again, like even faster. Like this is I'm gonna get a black belt in 6 months instead of 6 years. Um, and trying to be able to do it faster and being able to start fresh with like a new person, a new whole set of ideas, and like give something else to the readers who really love it. So I did get excited about it. I also had a lot of opportunities to invest in like really, really awesome startups. And so I started doing that a little bit more, and just enjoying kind of a freedom of opportunity to just like explore those things and find the things that I do naturally, like Naval says, right? Like if you clear your schedule and sort of let yourself naturally get gravitated to things, you'll find the things that you do naturally, and the stuff that you do naturally for its own sake is the stuff that you'll end up being the best at. I kind of trusted that process. And yeah, just have continued writing and continued investing over the last couple of years. And um, I mean, it's only been 5 years, but we'll see where that all continues to go.
And I guess out of curiosity, right? Like when you're building this book, the Almanac, the Book of Elon, what's your, I guess, day to day look like in sense of building this thing up? Because that's something that interests me very much so. And reading the Book of Elon, I was just like locked in on trying to figure out how can I simplify my life? How can I do things more efficiently? So I'm curious to see how the day to day would look like when you were building those things.
Yeah, somebody pointed out, and it's a very fair like joke slash criticism that like if you took 5 years to write this book, you didn't learn anything from Elon Musk. I was like, touche, touche, my friend, my anonymous troll friend. Um, so like my process is organized, but it's not like there's not like a ruthless efficiency to my process. I don't think. And maybe it should, maybe I could publish more books sooner if I tightened it up. It's organized, it's thorough, but I'm really, I like to tell myself like craftsmanship has no deadline. And I know that one of the mantras I repeat to myself as I write these books is like, you've got to claw your way up the power law. When you know you're playing a power law game, the difference between something that's 98% perfect versus 99% perfect versus 99.9% perfect is orders of magnitude in terms of the outcome that it achieves. And so I'm really insane and obsessive about closing that gap between something that's like feels pretty good versus like holy shit, this is the best book I've ever read, because you're not going to recommend an 8 out of 10 book. A book has to be a 10 out of 10 to get finished, let alone to get recommended. You're just competing with so many other books, other sources of dopamine and distraction. So I having felt the power of one of those top 0.0001% books, like I now am like, all right, that's got to be the bar. That takes time, it takes reps, it takes letting the dust settle sometimes. I'm not saying I can't do it faster or more efficiently, because there's definitely plenty of ways to improve that. And I have an EA who helps, and a lot of times now I have a partner on a book who helps, but I'm still like deep in the weeds, and I try to get a couple hours a day of just like focused time on a book, and I read these books like 10 to 20 times, multiple versions. You really get deep into these people.
And in that focus work, right? Like I've seen on interviews that your compass, like one of the goated books of yours is the poor Almanack of Charlie. Correct me if I'm wrong. One on
Poor
Charlie
Charlie's
Munger.
Almanac.
Charlie's Almanac. But in that focus time, what are you doing exactly? It's more so like compiling the interviews and the books, and like how do you eliminate all the things that are involved with that? Because I'm sure when Naval gives you all that information, all those interviews and things you've said, it's just so much. Like how the hell were you able to just compile it into one book?
Yeah, it's one of those things that just takes a lot of time, which is why it takes 5 years to write the damn things. Uh, it's a lot of original material to go through. It's a lot of you end up getting a lot of reps with the same material, and the job is to sort of like tease out the individual nuance of exactly what the best phrasing is, and where the seams of these ideas sort of fit together. I remember hearing Craig Newmark, who's the founder of Craigslist, like he was somebody asked like what did it take to start this company and to like get it off the ground, and he's like, I just really loved replying to customer support tickets. Like you wouldn't think that that's something that anybody could love, but I loved doing it, and so I would just do it all day, and I would do it with like a level of effort and intention that other people wouldn't or didn't. And that sort of stuck with me because I would not want to do that job, but like this is really fun to me, and I have like, for whatever reason, like I get enjoyment out of finding those seams and playing with those ideas and sort of turning them around against each other, and like going through seemingly very similar ideas in multiple different phrases and figuring out what the best one is and what ones are going to resonate and what's the clearest form, and finding the supporting stories and supporting arguments and just putting it all together. And I just like, I find that intrinsically satisfying and enjoyable. And so like, I like, I can tell you all the steps. And I've had people be like, oh, I'm going to like copy this and do it for this person. I'm like, more power to you, rock on. I don't actually think you're going to, because I don't know that there's another person on the planet with with like the appetite to spend 1,000 hours on what sounds like the exact same interview, to really like absolutely nail every detail, and then read the same book 20 times to hone out every wasteful word. Um, it's just leaning into the stuff that like you do uniquely well or with a unique level of passion.
I think that piece is super powerful. I've seen that in my own life. There's a lot of things that, for the past 5 years of doing this writing and recording podcasts, where it's just like I had to be kind of crazy to keep pushing on after work 2 to 3 hours after work, 4 hours, whatever, with no money upfront. I feel like a lot of people kind of get lost in thinking maybe the money's going to come sooner than it will, and then they just stop. And for myself, it's just been like kind of Goggins mode of just continuously do the thing that I have a passion for, and hopefully it works
Mm-hmm.
out. But I think like most people get lost in that place where it's like the money is the thing they're chasing, and when it doesn't come quick, it's like, all right, they just stop doing what they're doing. So I definitely resonate with that piece. And to add on to that, right, like I've been reading the book of Elon on my Kindle, downloading it to Readwise and just reviewing all the notes. And there was one piece of where Elon talks about like the maniacal urgency, and it was a huge realization for myself because I was recording an episode a week, and everyone around me was like applauding me, like, dude, you're the GOAT, like a podcast episode a week. And after reading it, I really had to think to myself, like, dude, I'm pretty sure I could do 2 or 3 a week. And it really helped me expand like my limits of saying, like, dude, I could do more than what I'm currently doing. I don't know for yourself, when you were writing this book,
Mm-hmm.
was there a certain switch that turned when you read that piece of like I could do more in my life, and what was those actual things?
Yeah, it's I mean, I do think Elon and Goggins have a lot in common. I often like reference them if somebody's familiar with Goggins but not with Elon. Is a good example of like you just he's so explicit and so viscerally proves that you are capable of like multiples more than you think you could, or than you think you are. And I mean, for me personally, it's definitely. I think the thing is like the number of things in parallel. Like for the past few years, I was like, I've got a young family. I was CEO of Scribe. I was starting this venture fund. I was recording podcasts. I was working on three books, launching the Book of Elon. It was a lot, and like the supporting argument for that was kind of looking at how many different things Elon's done. But that's not. And he says this himself. He's like, that's not good advice. Like that's not how most people should be living their life. And to be clear, like he did not run two companies at the same time until he was on his third company, for third and fourth, and even then it was like many years in. He was just the financier of Tesla for heavily involved chairman of the board, I should say, for the first like 6-7 years. But it's not something to aspire to necessarily, especially if your main thing hasn't yet broken through. Like the answer is actually more focus, not more different things. But it cranks up the intensity. I mean, the biggest thing that Elon's shown me, aside from just the tools of thought that I think are so useful, is that how quickly the future can arrive. And I think the ethos that he's created across his companies and across kind of the startup ecosystem that keeps reinforcing that is going to make for a really incredible kind of next generation of startups. Like when you think about the fact that Tesla and SpaceX are two of the biggest companies in the world and they're only 25 years old, what companies are getting started today that are going to be the biggest companies in the world probably in 20 years, like they can go even faster, because the future arrives ever faster.
Yeah. No, you touched up on some good points here, especially with like your own personal life of, you're running multiple different things. And the more I was doing research, I'm like, bro, you're doing the Good Friends podcast. You have a podcast with Scribe Media. You're also running Scribe, you're writing books, you're an investor. Like that progression. So you're saying in your own life, it was more so just like it came natural where all these things were just like coming into your plate and you're like, all right, I could handle it. Like it just seems like a lot that you're currently doing at the moment.
Yeah, and to be clear, like it was too much, and I was doing too many things too poorly. I stepped back as CEO at Scribe in this spring because I felt like there was somebody who could do the job better. He'd been at the company for a few years. He's a great operator. It was like, especially the person who sets the tone, for the culture of the organization needs to be like a very present maniac. I love Elon. I admire much about him. I've learned a lot from him, but I don't want his lifestyle. Like I'm not trying to become Elon Musk in any way, shape, or form. Like that's not how I'm wired. And I'm not gonna, be on a jet like flying all over the world, staying up till 3 a.m. with like fighting whatever fire there is and charging into the next chaos. Like I'm a little bit more of like a homebody librarian guy who's like I'm a deep researcher. I love supporting supporting entrepreneurs. I love investing in them. I love being a consigliere. But both my experience as CEO at Scribe and coming to study Musk more closely gave me this like really 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 clear and deep appreciation for how high the bar is for dedicating your life to a company, and where your level of intensity and effort has to be. And the thing that I say to myself now and others starting companies is like, if you can imagine yourself quitting something, don't start it. Like just keep looking for the thing that you can't imagine quitting.
That was real. Yeah, I mean, reading the book, it really just gave me perspective for sure as well. Like obviously I could understand from a very like high level that Elon is an animal. This guy just works and works and works, but hearing those specific stories of him just sleeping on the factory floor or him taking flights or that one story that was nuts about like I think it was the Boring Company where he's in traffic and he's just like it's like, why the hell is there traffic? And he calls the engineer to start digging a tunnel in the parking lot the same day in Tesla. I'm just like, dude, this guy's on a different level. But besides his, I guess like his work ethic, do you think there's other thing that also makes him singular in that sense? Obviously, he's very smart, but this guy's a trillionaire. So it's like, what's the cheat code that
Yeah.
Elon unlocked here?
I mean, it stacks a lot of things. Some of them are replicatable. Some of them I think are not. Right? He's obviously like innately very brilliant, and we all sort of have the some level we have the genes we're born with. But I do think there's a lot you can do to become, increase your natural level of intelligence. I think I think the things that are replicatable are actually the much bigger force, the much bigger multipliers, which is like what you sort of get at with that story is the bias to action, the insane bias to action. Like the speed at which he works is unbelievable, and how quickly he attacks. It's actually, I think it's two different traits. I think one is like the targeting system of figuring out what the most important thing is to work on, whether that's finding the bottleneck or identifying the next big opportunity, or um, having this deep sense of like where the long arc of this business is going and where the strong form of the technology is. I think there's a lot to unpack inside that skill set, but the other is that bias to action and just like doing things immediately with great intensity. Then you come to like actually filling all the hours with doing it. But this is the it's kind of they feel like very different ethos. Like the 4 Hour Work Week and like Elon feel like totally different ethos, but they're actually the very very similar playbooks, which is just like what's the 80/20, what's the fractal 80/20. And the 4 Hour Work Week thing is just like, okay, I'm going to do as little as possible to achieve my goal of financial independence or whatever. And Elon is like, I'm going to do as much as possible to achieve the biggest goals that humanity can set. But the toolkit as far as like prioritization and focus and signal to noise and urgently attacking the next most important thing with great intensity immediately is really really similar. And when you find these people who are just so effective, and you dig into like what it is, and you spend time with them, if you just shadow somebody who's effective, like you'll be shocked at how many things they make it through in a day, and how quickly they make decisions, how quickly they cut to the chase, uh, how quickly they just ignore or delete things that are unnecessary. People who've never had this experience, this firsthand experience of excellence, I think really they don't understand why some people earn millions of dollars a year and some people don't. And it's like there are some people that are literally just that much better at the thing that they do. There's actually a post that I'm trying to write about this, which is like the realization that average is actually fucking terrible. Like the average person, if you took every person on earth and took their average ability at playing chess, it's actually like zero. And so like you've got to filter out all the people who've never even seen a chessboard, and then filter out all the people who never don't understand any of the rules or how anything moves. And then you get to 1% of the population that is even trying to play this game or has ever learned the rules. And then you get to the fraction of a percent that have like played 100 games, and then you get to the fraction of a percent that have played a lot of games, and then you get to the fraction of a fraction of a percent that have like really taken it seriously with hundreds or thousands of hours of deliberate practice. And those people would beat the entire rest of the world, bottom half of the world combined at that particular thing. And it's easy to understand when it's chess,
Yeah.
um, just because it's so much less abstract and obvious. But like if you apply that same sort of mental model to uh, driving innovation or allocating capital or marshaling
Mhm.
resources or building electric cars, building rockets, some of that kind of stuff. Like you just don't understand how much more effective some of these people are.
Yeah, no, that ties to what you said earlier about like the power law of the difference of that 1%. And I
Mm-hmm.
could give you a perfect example. Like yesterday, I spent a decent amount of time on X, and my whole objective was to just thoughtfully comment on individuals' posts. And one in particular was Tim Ferriss. And as I looked through the post and I read through the comments, all of them seemed almost like very generic, like one sentence things. So I spent like 30 minutes thinking of something and posting a picture of Tools of Titans. And I guess he thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
So he reposted it. And I've experienced that with X, that if you are thoughtful, if you actually take the time to write something, it's significantly better than just commenting fire emojis on 100 people's posts. So it's like getting fixated on that depth versus width piece. And to the second point, right, you talked about like Pareto's law of 20% of your inputs result in 80% of your outputs. For yourself, Eric, if you could take a time machine to talk to your past self in Michigan State or the guy cooking up in Evergreen, what would be the things like you would tell him to focus on?
It's funny. I have been thinking about this somewhat accidentally, and I actually think it's funny to look back in life. I think there are so many like amazing paths I could have taken. Right, like there's a project at a hackathon that I think like if I'd taken that project seriously, it could be $1 billion company right now. And then there's like Evergreen. It's like, all right, if I had just continued Evergreen very consistently over the past 10 years, I'd have a million person newsletter there. And those are just like paths untaken, and there's nothing wrong with those decisions, because I wasn't necessarily striving for any one of those particular outcomes. The natural outcome that seems to have happened is like, I don't know, I really grabbed onto the book, and um, knowing how many books I read growing up and how much I loved books, like that's not particularly surprising. And it just turns out that the thing that is like that I've co-invested in, and that the world has responded to, has been these like really deep curations. And I'm very happy to just keep doing that. And like, but I'm also open to the fact that like I can take another path whenever I want to. I don't I don't think it's great to like live your whole life beholden to the goals set by a version of yourself 20 years ago. We're a different version of ourselves born each day, and you do want to spend at least some time like reevaluating the givens of the past and decide if they still work for you and who you want to be now and going forward.
And so that piece, right? Like you had that fork in the road of choosing the hackathon or doing what you're doing now of writing. Um, I feel like Elon in his own life, he does things from the sense of just like how could it impact society, which I think he's just on a different level from most people. So for yourself, like you would tell your past self to just focus on the passion effectively, or is there like something more to that?
I mean, the most practical or generalizable thing that I think would have applied at various stages is like, um, think really hard about what you want to commit to and commit really hard to it. Um, not for, you don't have to tattoo it onto your face, but like, the that's been the common thread of all of the the big success that I've had. And I've also committed hard to things that ended up not working out. Like I've not gotten on trains that would have taken me great places, and I've stayed on trains that took me too far in the wrong direction. But also that's part of life, and I've learned lessons doing that. And I don't like I don't spend a lot of time regretting those. I just appreciate what I can going forward and use the experience I have.
Right, right. And so right now, Eric, like in 2026 and beyond, like what's your thought process like with everything that you're working on? Are there like some things that I know with the Scribe CEO, you took a step down from that. With podcasting, I know you have two at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong there, but like what's your thought process with the podcasting? Why do you do it? What's the purpose for this?
I mean, I love podcasting. I think it's a very elegant kind of art form, and it's a fun thing to do. Like I like having conversations with people. I'm often surprised by things that I say or things that other people say, and like deep, thoughtful conversations. Podcast also becomes an excuse to have these high quality, well researched like things, and the fact that a byproduct of them is this like digital clone that's zero marginal cost and lives forever is like also a miracle. But it's almost a secondary uh, thing to just enjoying spending the time. Um, so yeah, Smart Friends is the main podcast, and I also do Author Hour for Scribe, where I just interview authors and try to get their background and the impact the books had on their life. And I meet a lot of really interesting people that way, that I wouldn't have stumbled across, or that are outside the scope of like the kind of tech and entrepreneurship stuff that mostly goes on Smart Friends. Um, I mean, I'm working on 2 more books. Have made what I think are some absolutely killer investments over the last couple of years in startups, and so that flywheel kind of keeps continuing. I've got a young kid at home now, so that takes up more time and more joy than I have to put into work at the moment. And I really like I'm taking kind of an intentional lull in work while young kids are at home. Like I think I'll never retire. So that this period of time before they're in school is actually like the best period of time to be slightly underemployed. And so I think that's a perfectly that's plenty for me for the next couple of years. Every time I've taken like kind of a step back, something really exciting kind of appears to fill the void. So I'm just like trust the process. And there's really, I think there's long-term alpha in being like slightly underemployed and just like getting re-educated and experimenting and researching a bunch of stuff that you might not otherwise be able to, supporting friends and supporting companies and just reading and getting back to the roots a little bit.
You resonate with that piece. My wife and I, we had twins 4 months ago.
Oh,
So
congratulations, dude.
thank you,
You
man.
look
Thank you.
incredibly well rested for a man with 4-month-old twins. This
Thank you,
is,
man. Thank
I
you.
don't
Yeah,
know,
dude.
Botox, makeup, like whatever you're doing, dude. If you
No,
guys aren't
none of the
seeing this
above.
video, this is
Yeah.
the best looking man with 4-month-old twins that the universe has ever seen.
Appreciate it, dude. No, but seriously, like this time frame has been, like you said, like a reset for myself because obviously all that time that I previously had has gone out the window. And it's been good for me because I really got to like look at my life from a third person view. And for some reason, like good things have been happening in my life with the podcast the past couple months. So I don't think it's a coincidence right there. So Eric, tying back to your podcast and also the books too, like I'm curious for one, for selfish reasons, what's your process in terms of preparing for podcasts? And also with the books, if you could, give us some alpha there.
My process in preparing for a podcast.
Yeah, in terms of like the I guess the preparation that goes into it for smart friends, like what are you doing before? Or is it more so you just go in with the intention of a great conversation?
Yeah, it's mostly that I found that there's like a messy middle where if you do like 2 hours of prep, you do a worse job than if you do zero. And so I usually it's either like a lot of prep, like when I spent a day with Naval, I did a lot of prep, like 50 plus hours, more. But the average episode, even probably 80% of the episodes, I'd show up with like 3 or 4 maybe broad categories. And I just say like these are the I want to have a 15-minute-ish section on this, and I'm gonna like open it up, and then I'm just gonna trust my curiosity for all the follow-ups. I find that if I have a 2-page outline and I have in my head a structure of the order that I want this conversation to go, then I find myself trying to steer it, and I'm like in my head about the meta, and I'm like editing while I speak, and I'm just not present. And what I actually think makes the best podcast is to be a proxy for the curiosity of the audience and just bring your own energy um and curiosity to it. But I'll also say like I am not a there are people that are professionals in this and much better, like David Senra and like Rick Rubin and Chris Williamson are amazing podcasters who have thought about this for thousands of hours. And I'm like a weekend warrior podcaster. Like I've done 100 some episodes, but I'm not doing it 3 times a week like Chris Williamson and hiring coaches and all this stuff. So there's definitely better examples than me to learn from, I think.
To add my 2 cents too, I completely agree with what you just mentioned about like the format of podcasting initially when I was doing this, and I still have so much work to do. But at first, it was very robotic from my sense of like, all right, these are the questions I compiled. And a lot of times, I'd be honest, I'd be in my own head just thinking about the next question and next question that ultimately it wouldn't be a conversation. It was just very much like receive answer. Okay, cool. Next thing. And ultimately that's the thing I want to work towards to get better at, of just chiming in, listening, providing my own insight. So in terms of like preparation, I could see how, if you over prepare, a lot of times you could feel like very stuck to that script of like, I need to get these 10 questions or 20
Yeah.
questions in as well?
There's lots of different styles. I've done interviews where the person does really, really thoughtful, they research and they have 5 very, very thoughtful, super, or well articulated questions that I've never been asked before. And that's one level of it. Some people just riff, but riff with like a ton of mental models in their head and a lot of background research. I had one, I did an interview. Oh shit, I wish you could remember the name of the podcast off the top of my head, because this was a really excellent. He like dug up all these old photos and screenshots and stuff from like my old websites and early Instagram and old Facebook and stuff like that. And it was like this very kind of like unique visual thing that triggered a lot of nostalgia. And it was like a really fascinating thing that pulled out a bunch of information that I hadn't done before. So I think it totally depends on the format. And what you don't want to do is like start a podcast where you're doing exactly the same thing that 100 other podcasters are also doing. Like Munger has this great advice. It's like a great brand maximizes or minimizes a few variables, one or two. So I think like again, I'm not setting out to build the world's biggest podcast, but if you think about the most successful one that's been launched in the last 2 years, it was TBPN, which looked nothing like any other podcast. And I think just maybe the most obvious one is episode length. And so like, could you do a 10-minute episode, a 10-minute interview episode, or a 10-minute like how much could you pack into 10 minutes if you were like mega distiller? Or how do you get an interview like something like Acquired, that an interview that feels more like a biography, and it's like the interview of someone's entire life, and it's a 10 or 12 hour podcast or something, and it's really rich, and there's interludes and there's other stuff. There's a lot of ways you can take it, but I think there's a lot of like lemming kind of brand behavior in podcasts. I think the creative space is so much bigger than most people are actually using.
For sure. I'd heard Mr. B say something similar to that, of trying to create that purple cow. Like when
Hmm.
you create a piece of content, create a piece of video, you are competing with everyone on the internet. So how can you make your thing stand out? And that's something that, I'm continuously trying to figure out and work on, because it's just, there's so many podcasts out there that it's very saturated in a sense.
Yeah.
Eric, want to finish off with this piece here. Do you have any gems, anything you want to share with those new books that you were cooking up with David?
I mean, I've got a blog post that collects the maxims, the founders' maxims. But I think the best thing, the maxims aren't going to mean anything if you don't have the stories to back it up. So that's what we're doing in the book, is pulling out, I think 25, maybe 30 of the most important and impactful maxims for how to live, this incredible life, and backing them up with stories that'll make them stick with you forever. So I just shared one of those on my email newsletter, at ejorgenson.com is the link if people want to sign up for it. But I just think there's so much. I love the Founders podcast, and I love David Senra, both as the human and the show. And so if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to go subscribe, go listen to a couple episodes, scroll through, find a name that catches your attention, and start somewhere. There's athletes, there's directors, there's entrepreneurs, there's leaders throughout history that he studies and pulls out the lessons from. And I think it's this really amazing organic kind of self-education that resulted in him distilling these maxims that in some cases are nowhere in the kind of truism or the wives tales or the common knowledge that people share, but there are the principles that drive outlier success. And even if they're uncomfortable, some of the maxims, a lot of people recoil against a little bit, but it's hard to deny when you go through the whole body of work that they are correlated with these outlier successes. And again, you make the choices you make. You don't have to. Not everybody should aspire to be an outlier success, like by definition. And the sacrifices that these people make are often not worth it, even by their own judgment over the course of their lifetime. So, but I think it's an awesome and fun thing to do, to try to like capture that energy and put it in a book, which is just the medium that I know how to do.
And to add on to that too, I mean, Dave Senra, his podcast is amazing, man. He's absolute legend with the Rick Rubin podcast. I saw that one. I saw the one you guys did
Hmm.
together. And he's one future guest that hopefully we could get on here. We have similar backgrounds. He's from Miami. I'm from Miami. His dad's Cuban. My dad's Cuban. So we'll
Yeah.
see if one day we'll make that happen. Eric, my last question to finish this off, man. It's been a banger of an episode. What was the reasoning behind choosing to do this podcast with myself? I don't have a big audience. I don't have much to offer to you at this point. Why do it?
You were persistent and polite and uniquely sort of presented yourself well. Like I'm not a snob about going on big podcasts or anything like that. And I actually I really take some pride and some excitement in going on shows early that I think are going to be big and working with people that I think are amazing. And I think people underestimate how big of an impact relatively small audiences can have. Like a lot of people will go way out of their way to attend a room of 100 people in person, but they'll blow off somebody with 100 or even 1,000 listeners on a podcast. And I think that's crazy. I think if somebody's going to spend an hour listening to us while they're doing the dishes or going for a run or whatever, like that's incredible, and that's just as important as being in the room with somebody physically. I think you do a great job with this podcast. The stuff I checked out looked amazing. Clearly you're dedicated to it and like dedicated to a quality product. Admittedly, Wall Street Poppy was not like I was sure we were a brand fit right off the top. But digging a little deeper, I was like, all right, this is not a crypto scam.
Right.
We can get into it.
No, I appreciate that, Eric. I mean, truly today has been an absolute honor for me, man. I'm very humbled. Like I said, five years ago, when that book came out, one of my best friends recommended to me. I read it so many different times in lunch or going
It's
to
awesome.
sleep and taking walks, man. And to the fact that I was able to speak to you today. If I were to tell myself that 5 years ago, I would be like, dude, you're dreaming, dude. That's not gonna happen. So appreciate you, man. Really do.
No, man, you're awesome, and you're paying it back to everybody who comes down the line behind you. We're all just trying to like learn everything we can. I appreciate the kind words. I'm so glad the book was useful for you, and I hope you gift it and recommend it to many other people in turn.